Hi everyone, welcome to Casual Watch Talk Sunday Social. Got a jam-packed show for us today, but before we do that, let's kick it all off with a wristwatch check. Thomas, you're in the hot seat. What are you wearing?
I'm in the hot seat. I'm wearing a vintage Omega today. It's a baby Plo Prof.
Ooh.
Oh, nice.
Really nice.
Very cool.
Got the nice shark mesh bracelet and the hands of the original Plo Prof, but it was a 120-meter semi-professional model they made alongside the Plo Prof, 600 meters. So it's if you don't want the big button sticking out and the crown on the left, and you don't like the shape of the Plo Prof, it's an alternative. So vintage one from the 70s.
Cool. Yeah. Awesome. TJ, what are you wearing?
Hey, so a Marathon Navigator Steel, no date. Sorry, Sam. I do miss it, but I just like the look of it this way. And you'll recall I actually had sent one of these back because the minute hand moved around, and this one's flawless. So I'm very glad I ordered another one. I just realized I couldn't live without it. Like, I just love it. And so I'm super happy that this one worked out.
That's good. So they did actually do a exchange.
They did a return. They said there's nothing wrong with it, and I think the watchmaker, between the customer service and the watchmaker, misunderstood. They thought I was referring to the minute hand jumping when you push the crown in, which they all do, but I was really talking about it would subsequently move around. And he's like, the watch is fine. Like, it really isn't fine. And that's when I thought, well, I'm not going to order another one if they think that's fine. But I just took a shot, and I ordered it through Teddy, and then I realized the Teddy Baldessar store, and I realized they just ship it from the same place anyway. So I thought that they must have thought I was being cheeky or something. But anyway, I'm glad I got it. It really is awesome.
Oh, cool. Mark, what are you wearing?
I have the Christopher Ward C65. C65 Super Compressor Black Sand.
Such a good look.
Again, no date. And it was so nice just to set up a watch without a date yesterday when I was harried. So yes, most of my watches have dates, but once in a while you just want the easy life.
Richard, first time on the show. Thank you so much for joining us.
No, thank you for having me. I didn't realize I'd set up I clicked on the link earlier, so as soon as the live stream went live, I had the audio from this session as well as the background audio from actually watching it on YouTube. I was getting so confused, but I've fixed my own technical issue. But if I was looking a bit perplexed, that would be why.
Well, I look perplexed all the time, so people probably wouldn't have noticed.
Well, what do you think about my background? I've kind of got the sort of the blue hues, which is inspired by your your go-to background. So
you just need a couple of books that you've never read on the back, and then and a tiki mug.
Are you even a YouTuber if you don't have blue light?
Yeah, exactly. Oh, I think I've got a little. I can. There you go.
Nice.
There we go.
Okay. All right. Control.
Well, more importantly, what are you wearing?
So I thought it was only right that I wear two watches, of course.
Okay.
So I've got the trusty Studio Underdog watermelon, of course. This blur things, hopefully. And I've also got one that kind of looks like a Studio Underdog watermelon, but isn't quite. So there you go. If I can.
Interesting.
It's the mirror image almost.
Yeah, exactly. So I thought I'd do you the honor of wearing two very different watches.
We'll definitely get to the avocado gate, the avocado controversy during this chat, I'm sure.
It's the Hawaiian controversy, because I'm sure you're on a hit list now in Italy.
For sure, exactly. Well, that's what I wanted from the get-go.
Todd, you're up next. What are you wearing?
Going along with the theme of the micro brand today, I'm wearing the Detroit Mint Classic.
Yep. Very nice.
It's the green dial, and it has a date, Sam, so you'll be happy. Really nice watch, very comfortable. Really enjoy it.
Yeah, I think he does a great job of those. Okay, I am wearing, I'll go solo on this one, kind loan from Dave, who's on a plane. He can't join us today, but he sent me one of the Haraj Super Seed date versions, because a lot of the Haraj watches don't have a date. I said, if I'm going to review one, I need really one with a date. So he sent me this Haraj Super Seed. Incredible micro rotor on the back. I've never seen anything like this. The movement is spectacular. So there'll be a review very soon on the channel. That's when I'm not giving Hodinkee a hard time for their G-Shocks, which was released today.
Say that Haraj looks like it's got a great bracelet too. I'm just trying.
Bracelet is gorgeous.
Yeah,
it is. It's a dive watch, so it doesn't. The bracelet is very much like you would see on a Speedmaster, I think, but it's integrated. I would say you can't easily remove it. I think you have to have a tool to remove it, and I am not that tool because I haven't removed it. So, marks off. Okay, well, let's kick this off. So, guys, Richard's here to talk, obviously, about Studio Underdog, but keep those questions coming in if you've got any questions for Richard as we go through. But, Richard, the question of the day is, should a watch company care about us? Is the question. But let's kick it off with what's been going on with Studio Underdog. Do you mind doing a quick intro for people that perhaps don't know who you are?
Yeah, sure. So, my name's Richard. I started a brand called Studio Underdog. Oh, it's coming up to 3 years now. I think 3 years in March. So, next month we'll be celebrating our third birthday. Although it feels like I've been doing this for a hell of a lot longer. But Studio Underdog was a little passion project that I started during lockdown. Was a watch enthusiast, was working in the industry a little bit, and with a background in design. Spent those extra hours locked up at home, starting to kind of build a brand as something fun to do, as a literal passion project. And a few years on, it's still keeping me very busy. And I guess a quick synopsis of the approach of Studio Underdog in terms of a brand and the way I approach it is, I felt the watch industry was, tends to be really quite serious, quite stuffy. And I wanted to do something quite playful and whimsical, whilst also still, being considered a serious watch. And that's what's led me kind of down this little journey and this little rabbit hole, really.
Awesome.
How long was it? I have a question. How long was it from when you had that idea in lockdown till you had watch in hand? I'm just really fascinated by this.
I mean, the first watches in hand weren't too long because it was, those were initially just samples, and it was it just felt like, lots of little stepping stones, really. I definitely didn't set out from the get-go to, with huge ambitions of starting a brand. That would have felt far too daunting. So it was lots of little bite-sized chunks. The first was I did some designs, posted them online, and I think this will, we'll kind of get into this when you talk. How impactful is should we be heard? Should we be listened? And so I'll delve into that, a little bit later. But yeah, lots of little bite-sized. First posting some designs online, then getting some samples made, and even by that point, having samples in hand, still didn't feel, real as it were, but as a brand. But that was it made it far more achievable.
Yeah. Was the first watch? Did you start with the watermelon watch? Was that the first one, or?
Yeah, there was 3. So the original 3 were the watermelon, the desert sky, and the goofy panda. So it was those were the original 3 from the 01 series. And I think if you see on this page, we've got the 4th one that was added a little bit later, which was mint choc chip. But those were the original 3. And the watermelon was certainly the one that kind of caught people's attention, whether that's media or enthusiasts, and is obviously the loudest. But I thought maybe it would be a case that people would discover the watermelon and then come to the website and go, actually, the goofy panda is much more wearable for me, and that's what I'm going to wear. But yeah, to this day, the watermelon still seems to be one of the most popular. So yeah, only right that I would put it on today.
Yeah. Canadian Watch Monkey's got a good making a comment. When a passion project turns into a viable business and then a successful business, that is something special. I mean, you must have been surprised with the response. I went through a phase of reviewing a lot of micro brands, and there's mixed success, to say the least, especially when they start off Kickstarter. But you didn't go the Kickstarter route, did you?
I did actually, yeah, no, I did. Yeah, I've just sort of, the brand has kind of, quite quickly, I guess, matured past being considered, a Kickstarter brand, as it were. And that's a little bit by design. But yeah, I think sometimes it's quite difficult. There's almost like rungs to it. There's different tiers and there's lots of different, steps up the ladder. So I guess, I didn't find it. What was the question? Was it difficult or what?
No. I mean, you must have been surprised at the success. I was just saying, because there's a lot of, I don't know what the rest of the panel thinks, but it seems like micro brands have quite a mixed, mixed trajectory.
For sure. I think a big part, one of the reasons is, micro brands, Studio Underdog is a great example. We obviously had, I'd had a good idea in terms of the design and people that, the concept resonated with people. But if the quality of the actual watches didn't kind of exceed people's expectations, it would have probably quite quickly kind of, I don't know, patted out, or people wouldn't have been quite so engaged. So I think because the quality is, better than people expect, they kind of go, oh, actually, as fun and silly as this is, it still can be taken quite seriously. So I think that's something that helped. But yeah, it kind of it didn't all happen at kind of the click, in an instant. Even though it's only been 3 years, it feels like it's taken a fair bit of time, and the start was really difficult to get people discovering the brand, to get watches in hand. The first few reviewers that I was trying to get in touch with, it was a real hustle. It was quite difficult. Whereas now the brand's a bit more established, that kind of becomes easier.
Yeah, I think there's a sub $1,000 range is the hardest segment of the market to survive in, isn't it? So
I think so. There's a hell of a lot of competition, but I think that's why it's important to stand out from the crowd, in one way or another. And we obviously do that kind of from a design perspective, maybe a marketing perspective as well. When people think about the brands, not just the products, they think about kind of the fun that we're having, and people can kind of relate and engage to that, which is great. Just means I can have more fun.
Yeah.
And how big is? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Because you're mainly a dial orientated brand that sets you apart. Do you think?
Say that again. Sorry.
You think that because you have a lot of focus on your dial designs, that sets you apart from a lot of other brands?
I think so. I think it's. I guess in a small way, I'm able to innovate. The 01 series, that was innovation by color and kind of clever graphic design. You look at the chronograph series, and it's like nothing you've ever seen before. But there's also a hell of a lot of like vintage cues in there, so it's also somewhat familiar. So it's this kind of weird balance that you kind of have to process at an instant, and then innovation in the 02 series as well. So yeah, it's a combination of factors, but definitely at a glance, the dial is kind of is sort of an integral part.
Sure.
Most of the way when I'm designing, it's I'm taking a lot of vintage inspiration. I'm taking a lot of product that's there, and then seeing how I can put my own sort of unique footprint on it. Really.
The dial is the face of the watch, though, isn't it? It's the head of the watch.
Yeah, I guess it's one of the first things people see, before then they dive into the detail. You're much more likely to see the dial color before you figure out if it's got drilled lugs or not.
Sure.
TJ, you had a question?
Yeah, well, I was curious. Yeah, first, congrats, because I think you've created something both original and traditional, and I'm a fan of the old school styles, but everybody's doing them, so it's hard to break out. But you've done it, so cheers to you for that. That's a fantastic. And my question is how much has the brand grown? I heard you use the term "we." Is it multiple staff now? Is it in the tens or hundreds? Like how big is the company?
Yeah, so we're, it's still fairly small. I had to, I think my first hire is probably about 9 months ago or so. And since then we've got a few more. So the Studio Underdog team is, there's 4 of us working in kind of the office, down here in Brighton, which is where I live. We've also worked really closely, with our kind of, our watchmakers, and his assembly team is really growing. That's, Raphael, who set up Horologium, and we work really closely together. And I think there's sort of 8 members of the assembly team, because all our watches, are assembled in the UK. And as the demand grows, we're having to build that out together. So yeah, I think there's 8 of them now on that assembly team, which is something that's, I guess, really quite exciting, because it's it's not easy kind of building a team like that in the UK. In Switzerland or in China, you've got plenty of suppliers and assembly partners that you could work with. They're a dime a dozen, whereas in the UK it's something that doesn't really exist, and we've had to really build that out ourselves. So yeah, it's a we now. Gone are the days, I think maybe some of you might remember, on my website I had a meet the team section, and it was just lots of different photos of me. So I was sad to see that go, but yeah, it's just the part and parcel of that maturing business, really.
Yeah, I remember that, because did you had 3 pictures of yourself, and was it like Rich, Richard, and Ricky or something? Was the 3
Yeah,
staff?
exactly. Yeah, exactly. All different roles. Founder, head of marketing. T-boy. I think some of the photos were even just like, mirrored perspectives of the same photo. So yeah, it was an opportunity to have a lot of fun. And you go back and you look at the kind of, a lot of brands at my stage of the growth, in terms of if they're launching on Kickstarter or first coming to the market, they always tend to try and beat their chest and make themselves look a lot bigger than they are, to try and build trust. And actually, it's a bit backwards, that, isn't it? You're almost having to, you're kind of faking a large thing to build trust. And so I kind of wanted to poke humor at that, really. I just like poking fun at, things that I kind of maybe don't resonate with, or don't quite get on board with. So I poked fun by sort of doing the total opposite, and that was much more successful. People really found that funny. They could engage with it. They instantly sort of started to understand the brand. I was reading an about page,
Yeah, and it's, because I went through a phase of, there was, I think it was probably 2019, there was a lot of micro brands coming out, and they all seemed to create this backstory, or like some of them were so bizarre, like somebody had met somebody on a train, and they just seemed to get more convoluted as they went on, whereas yours was, hey, I started this brand and I quite like the
I like
Well,
watches.
I think a lot of the time, you look at so many successful brands today, and so they have so much reliance and importance on their history, quite rightly. And so I think when new brands come to market, they want to have a history, because they know how important that is for all these other brands. And so they kind of really want to try and build a story, and then it kind of it's tough to it's tough to do. Whereas my history was, I don't have any history. I've just set up a brand. But again, it's just a bit of a fresh approach that people could get on board with, and say, okay, well, not every brand has to have hundreds of years of of archives. And it's a bit of freedom for me when it comes to design. I don't have any archives to look back on.
And I think the lack of history has stopped being quite the stick that's used to beat new brands. When Christopher Ward came out, they were always beaten over the, well, you don't have a history thing. But you don't see that anymore, or if you do, it's selectively applied or selectively forgotten. So people want to rave about Phil and Mary, but no one says you don't have a history, just to pick one. So I don't think that history stick is quite as used as it once was, because people have shown you can be successful without it, such as yourself.
For sure.
I have a history question, actually. Sorry, Thomas. Canadian Watch Monkey is asking, and I want to ask this because I don't think I've asked you this before, but you must have a bit of a history in design and photography, because the website, as Canadian Watch Monkey puts here, the incredible photos, obviously, that are on the website really draw people in. So, did you have a background in that, or did you outsource it?
No, so I've got a background in design, so I've certainly got a creative eye, as it were, and worked in the watch industry for a while. So had when it came to the actual watch design, I kind of had a head start there. When it came to the photos, or more importantly, a lot of the animations that I have on my website, that was. Those are all done. So even if you look at my original Kickstarter campaign, I think one of the reasons that, even though the brand is less than 3 years old, a lot of the time it can feel maybe a little bit more mature than that, is because a lot of the time you look at a brand's original project and it's really rough around the edges. A good example is, if you think of Brew watches as just an exceptional micro brand. They do some incredible things now. Their storytelling is amazing. Jonathan's really switched on. But you can go back and look at his original Kickstarter projects. It's really, I find it really fascinating, because you can really see the sort of, the development, the growth of that brand, and that it's come a really long way. I was in a lucky position where, the assets that I had from the outset were actually of really high quality, which, I think has helped the brand to mature quite quickly. And that was some of those animations that done by a guy called John T. And he's basically been my best friend all throughout uni. We used to ride a tandem bike to uni together. And I set up Studio Underdog. And I said to him, I'm starting this brand. He said, I'm just leaving my job. He was working for McLaren, doing sort of animation. He was like, I'm leaving my job. He was setting up to go freelance and wanted to build out his portfolio. And I was like, great, let's work together. On what is my passion project. I obviously got mates rates, which was great. And we've worked together pretty much ever since. And it's certainly a little head start there, but that was very fortunate.
Yeah, they're spectacular, aren't they? These animations.
They're great, and the amazing thing is, this is something that was 3 years old, and I think his if you look at kind of our if you go to our homepage and scroll down a little, the O2 series on the actual homepage is another one of his animations that he's done, and that's really exceptional. So this is also some amazing video work by Bowl of Salmon on Instagram. I'm sure maybe some of you might have heard and seen his photos. He does some super cool stuff.
But there's an animationist on here as well.
Oh yeah, so the animation, if you go to the homepage, I'll direct you. And then under the pizza, so yeah, just there.
Oh, there we go. Yeah.
So yeah, super, super slick.
Yeah, awesome. Cool. Thomas, you had a question, but Richard, before we do that, we might be getting a little bit of the tapping noise on the desk, just FYI, just before somebody mentions it. Yeah, no worries. Thomas, sorry, I cut you off before.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you, when it comes to your design, do you design watches with possible future trends in mind, with the idea of what a customer wants? Or dependent on budget constraints, or because you come up with an idea of an aesthetic that you like, or a mixture of all of these, maybe?
Well, it's funny. It's a good question, because that's actually got a lot harder. When I first did the 01 series, I had no following. I had no customers. There was no voices. There was no one asking, and that kind of allowed me to just concentrate and focus on my own approach. Not really think what the market wants, what customers want. And actually, I think that was, a key to the success of Studio Underdog. I think a lot of brands, when they're starting, they're trying to sort of design or build a watch based on statistics, based on what's popular and what might sell. And the fact that I was doing this passion project just because I wanted, a watermelon chronograph on my wrist meant, I wasn't having to think kind of commercially. And so that was quite easy at the time, but it's got a lot harder because, now when I'm developing the O2 series or looking forward 03, 04, I have got those voices, I have got the expectations, customers are sort of telling me what they want. And I kind of have to take a step back and go, what led to the initial success? It was not thinking commercially. It wasn't a case of following what the trends were, or what would allow me to sell, the most watches. So that's something that I do kind of really challenge myself to build into, into part of that design process. But it's gotten harder because, the landscape has changed for me,
Right. Yeah.
Do you want to take a pop at Christian's question?
Yeah. So he said, "I'm salivating at the thought of owning a pizza studio Underdog. Will there be enough watches at the British Watchmaker Show in London? As I'm sure they are limited. Really want one."
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no. So the pizza watches, that was quite a fun little project. I'll give you a bit of background as well on that, because it didn't sort of it didn't transpire exactly how I expected. This was a bit of a joke at the start. It was an April Fool's. And when you think about Studio Underdog, what I wanted people to think is, we're playful, but we're also really refined. So when we did these pizza watches in April Fool's, the joke was that in a way these are so unrefined, so they don't really, speak to the brand's values. And that was the kind of, that was the joke. That was part of the April Fool's. I think I was so deep into developing the O2 series, during this time as well, that, in my head I thought, well, obviously it's totally ridiculous. But of course, for one reason or another, people really loved them. So we decided to launch them in a bit of a unique way, where rather than them being sort of online and you can buy them online, it's a case you can only get them from myself or from Andrew from Time and Tide directly in person. And the way we're doing that is we don't have, jackets with, hundreds of watches inside our pocket, or, not like Santa Claus with a big old rucksack. We'll have for the most part, we'll have these little sort of business cards that have a QR code that people can go to, sort of a private link that's password protected and things, and you can only get those cards from myself or Andrew. We do plan to have some stock at the British Watchmakers Day event in London in March. But even if the stock goes, the physical stock, you'll still have access. So yeah, don't worry about that.
One of my favorite stories I've heard about you is how you actively go after flippers.
Well, this is a great example of the pizza project, because that was part of the thought process. Was, in order to get these, it's not just a case, you can buy them online. And I've had some pushback from that, saying, oh, you're restricting kind of enthusiasts from getting these watches. But we've done a couple of activations, and I think there's probably about 60 pizza watches now that are out in the wild that customers have bought and got their hands on, and not a single one of those has been put up for in the after sales market, which really shows that these watches, they really are going to enthusiasts, which is great. And yeah, I tend to kind of take a stand against against flippers as well. If they're if I see any listings on eBay where someone's sort of flipping a watch before having even received it, I'll take a stand against that. If someone's got their watch, they've looked at it, and within a split second they decide it's not for them, that's totally their call. I'm not fussed with that. But it was just when you can sort of see some people just trying to kind of profit, I'd rather cancel that sale and ship that watch off to someone that wants it, really.
But that's also part of the, if not necessarily the caring about the customer, although I think in your case it probably is, but it's something that brands will pay attention to. I heard a story from a watch brand where a rare watch had been sold, and then something very similar turned up in one of the grey market stores, one of the well-known grey market stores in the US. And the brand were furious because they're going, "You've just sold this rare watch," and then the customer flipped it. And there was a big runaround to find out whether the watch that was suddenly appearing online was the one that had just been sold, because the brand didn't want to see that happen. Now, that's the brand taking care of itself, but also knowing their customers. And you sit there and go, if they could have found that customer and said, "You're not getting on that list anymore." So perhaps that's the inverse of customer care.
Yeah, it's a fine line to tread, really. But I was happy to kind of see the response that I got from that. I thought I'd maybe get some mixed response, but it's overwhelmingly positive, except for the people that I cancelled their orders. I've had all sorts of excuses because I've cancelled a fair few now.
I thought it was a great idea. I was glad to see you do it.
Thank you.
That's awesome.
Well, it got scary for George Bamford, didn't it, with that G-Shock that he released, and he was sort of more or less trapped in a G-Shock store. They couldn't open the doors or anything. It's got silly, that type of thing, hasn't it? The reselling of stuff. I know my wife works for Disney, and they're expressly forbidden from reselling anything. As they call them, cast members, they're expressly forbidden from. And Disney will do the same thing. It will hunt down if you also annual pass holders as well. They'll track them down. I think it's definitely coming. So we've got a couple of questions coming through. Canadian Watch Monkey again firing the questions here. He's saying, does the pizza watch come in a mini pizza box?
It does, yeah, exactly that. It comes in a mini pizza box, yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, which has been fun. So we kind of we designed that, and it was just a little last minute fun little idea. And that's been great. People have really enjoyed that, especially with the plan. The plan for this project is it's a great excuse to for me and for the brand to meet the community. We're pretty much direct consumer, online only for the vast majority of things. So now we've got this great excuse to go around the world and host pizza parties, and it's going to be a hell of a lot of fun. So we're sort of building out our calendar of travel and seeing how many people from the community we can meet, and we're signing up to red bars and showing face if we're welcome. So
yeah,
brilliant. I find that big watch companies don't often care about customers when it comes to marketing. They try and influence the customer to aspire to a lifestyle and try to set trends. Do you think that when a company makes you feel special and exclusive, and a watch is maybe limited and hard to get, then there's a bit of a winning formula?
I think that approach depends on the size of the company. So if you're dealing with a large multinational, you're not dealing with the multinational. Your contact is with the boutique rather than with the multinational. So it's the boutique's job to make you feel special and want you to come back. So, that's the boutique or the AD's job. When you're a smaller company, you can take a more direct approach because you're not selling 500,000 watches a year. You might be selling a few thousand. So you actually can then reach individual people. It's much harder for a large multi-brand to do it.
Sure, I appreciate that. I was just going to Richard's point where he was saying that about the meeting people individually and with pizza boxes and stuff like that, and meeting.
Well, it's different. It's basically a different way to make a customer feel special, right? If to your point where some brands they don't have a face, and maybe the feeling of being special is from getting allocated a limited piece or whatever. Micro brands, smaller brands like myself, there's different ways that customers can feel special. You can write a message to an Instagram DM and have the founder of the brand getting back to you with whatever kind of sort of enthusiast or really focused kind of questions that you have, and that's a way to kind of make a customer feel special. We're looking to do these in-person events and host meetups and just have fun, and it's different approaches really, I guess, is the thing. Let me know again if my mic is tapping. I'm trying not to.
No worries. Somebody's asked an interesting question here, and then I'll go to the panel. But Patel here has said, Richard, do you consider the watermelon a traditional dress watch, or is the term outdated? Now, I think this is interesting because the movement that you opted to use, even though it's now made in China, I believe, all of the equipment and the original I guess the original design, it was a Swiss design, wasn't it, back in the day? And then at that time it was a chronograph watch, a Swiss chronograph watch from Venus. So I think that's quite a good question. I mean, where do you consider it falling in?
Well, I guess, to answer that question, we can kind of look back at my design approach. So it was very much, the kind of the silhouette of that watch is a 1960s chronograph. As you said, the movement originally a Venus 175. Really old movement. I think designed in the 1940s and sold to the Chinese Air Force in the 60s. And so I was looking at that kind of 50s, 60s era of the chronograph, and I stayed true to a lot of those design aesthetics and design decisions. When you look at the case, you can even look at kind of my strap selection as well, and you'll see I tend to go for quite traditional, quite muted colours. And then, I really sort of twist things up and mix things up when it comes to the dial. Again, you've got a lot of vintage cues, but modern, playful colours. And that juxtaposition was really important for me. This really old technology, a movement design in the 1940s, and then these modern sort of playful dials. And that's the kind of the approach that I followed through for the O2 series as well. A lot of the I almost followed the same brief that was given to the Dirty Dozen watches and a lot of the design decisions that I made were staying true to that brief. And then the dial is where I had my own my own fun, and that's, I think, that fine line between being a traditional piece but then also something really modern. And finding that line without it being a gimmick. So, for example, with the O2 series here, the case, we've got a closed case back. That was pretty much, as per the brief, improved water resistance. Why would you need to look through, a crystal at a movement when you're in the field? The mid case that we've done, most mid cases, the bezel will be a separate piece. We've not put it as a separate piece here because in the mid-40s, when these field watches were being made, it was being tooled out of a single piece. So we've stayed true to that. We've got drilled lugs. Every field comes with the NATO as well. We're staying true to a lot of these principles, and then we just have a lot of fun and go against all that when it comes to the concept of a dial. And that's my approach to design. That's my approach to what makes a Studio Underdog watch, really. And I think that has resulted in, the 01 series looking quite different from the 02 series while still feeling very Studio Underdog.
Yeah. Awesome. Any questions from the panel?
Yeah, sure. If I could.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, I had a question about inventory, because that seems to be the hardest thing when dealing with micro brands, is when you go to get one, they're not available. And obviously you can't just keep everything stocked. So is there more than one approach, like just do a one and done via Kickstarter, or do like bursts of, drops? And can you talk about that? And then how do you react to that? Because ultimately, do you have a measure of what business you're not getting just because of inventory, and then you can compensate for that?
I mean, yeah. So I think, first thing is all micro brands, all brands in general, have a different approach to that. Some, will. Some just won't particularly want to change their system, and they'll have a set quantity that they make per year, and they put them up, and if they disappear, they disappear. We're looking to grow and improve our improve our output. The thing is, as we've been doing that over the last 18 months, so has the demand. So it's not actually changed the position that we're in. Going into this year, we're looking at assembling around about 850 pieces a month. So we've got that kind of capacity, but the demand is still higher than that. So it kind of doesn't particularly change the situation. We just try and approach it as honestly and fairly as possible. So while some might kind of put up a specific quantity and then it sells out in 2 minutes and leaves people frustrated, we've opted for a kind of an order window approach, where on a specific day we'll open up our order window for 9 hours, just because that 9 hours was at some point in the day everywhere around the world. It's not a ludicrous time. Although the Aussies do get it a bit rough, I must admit. I think it's from midnight till 9 a.m. It used to be a 6-hour window that I do, but I changed it for the Aussies. But in that time, anyone can place an order, and then we just get cracking on building those orders and fulfilling them as soon as we can. And we communicate that with we keep everyone in the loop with the process and where we're at, and show them what we're doing and saying, look, we've hired 2 more assembly staff. Our output's increased by 50 pieces this month. And so far people have kind of really enjoyed that approach. But of course it varies from brand to brand. I do think it is important that to an extent that the demand is higher than the supply in some instances, because that obviously leads to potentially an increased value on the after sales. And that's not important that's important even for the genuine customer, because if you can see, you can buy a Studio Underdog watch for £500, you can wear it for a year, and then you can move on to something else and get your £500 back, then perfect. It kind of helps to justify that purchase decision. So that's really important, but that's something that's incredibly hard as a brand to control. So I don't really think any brands can. We've just been in a fortunate position that people love the product, and so yeah.
Yeah, companies need a good value proposition for people to part with their money, don't they?
I think so, exactly. Yeah.
I thought you did something awesome this week, which was an Instagram reel, and I've called it Avocado Gate, but you basically found your next Studio Underdog design possibly from not from you.
Yeah, exactly. I think this is, we were talking about, where do you keep the community involved? Where do you keep enthusiasts involved? And I think there's so many areas of my business, that I do keep the community involved and up to date, and listen to them and make changes. Every time I'm doing a drop, I'm trying to improve the service based on what people are saying. When it comes to the design, that's something that I really hold close to my chest, and I don't take too much input for. Whereas this is something slightly different, isn't it? So to give a bit of context for anyone that's not not in the loop, last week I discovered that there's a Chinese brand which is what I've got on the wrist today, which has obviously been heavily influenced by my own design, which is I've taken as a huge compliment. I think a lot of other brands would be saying sue them, but no, that's not really my style. So yeah, I've kind of taken it as a massive compliment and a bit of a milestone achievement for the brand. But they've also done a version which I've got here, which is they've called avocado.
Oh yeah.
So where is it? So I've decided for the first time to break my typical rule of taking no inspiration and no guidance, and my plan is to release a Studio Underdog avocado, inspired, basically copying a copy.
Yeah. They're going to come after you then. They'll have a nerve.
Maybe that. What a story that would make, though. What a story that would make.
It would, yeah, that'd be epic.
Brilliant.
Yeah, I thought that was so good. Your Instagram reel, the way that you did it, just straight off the cuff, it was so good. Yeah, we've got some stuff coming through. Somebody's asking, Raymond's asking, have you been demented with pizza requests, Richard? Have you been fielding a lot of people asking if they can buy it?
Oh, we have, yeah. We've had a lot of people asking, if they can have access, and we're staying really kind of true to the this hand delivered concept and just explaining to people how it works. I made a bit of an error where the first version of the website, when the pizza page went live, there was an area that you can kind of let us know where you'd like us to host a pizza party, and unfortunately, I'd kind of not quite realised the demand for these monstrosities, and so we had, I think, over 700 requests from people and places, but every single individual request came as an individual email into our inbox. So of course, for a good week, we were just trying to play catch up, and I've since changed that. So now it kind of gets submitted into a form, and I can just go through essentially on an Excel document and see all the data. But yeah, we've been inundated, which is great. That's what we want, and we want that kind of positivity and excitement from the enthusiast community. And it's a great opportunity for us to explore where our community is. We've seen a lot of people have said, come to Singapore. So, we've seen that's one of the top places that people have been saying. So at some point this year, my plan is to head out to Singapore and meet that community. So yeah, it's just a great excuse to kind of justify these meetups and getting face to face with enthusiasts.
Yeah.
Maybe the next one can be aubergine on pizza.
Yeah, exactly. There's plenty of
just pile on the horrors.
Options.
I sense you're a little offended at the. Is it the pineapple on the pizza, Mark, that you're not feeling the love for?
It doesn't worry me at all. I'm just concerned for Richard's safety should he ever go to Italy.
There's been a few requests from Italy. I think there was 5 people or so have said come to Italy, and I'm wondering if that's because they want the watch or they want to get rid of me. It's one of the two.
Yeah, I do some background checks before you go.
I mean, the toppings are endless, aren't they? The possible combinations that you could have on the pizza watch. It's possibly, or maybe there's a way that you can, have people somehow access the dial and put their own toppings on it.
Yeah, I want half pepperoni.
Allow people to do half and half. There you go.
yeah, half and half. Let's see if we've got any other questions. Any from the panel before I'm just gonna quickly have a look through.
Well, as he's looking, I wonder.
I wanted to ask one. Oh, go ahead.
Well, I feel like there's a point at which are you gonna feel like how it is, like you have your passion, right, and then it becomes your job, and then you start to hate that thing. Is there a point where you're like, I am not doing another one of these Seagull chronograph watches. I don't care what color someone wants. I'm moving on from here. Do you see that in your future?
Well, it's that's a really important point and something that I've considered from the outset. So even though, I've done a few different, different colorways, and I've done special projects here and there, if you look at what makes up the core range of the 01 series, it hasn't changed for about 2.5 years. I really wanted to make sure that those watches kind of become, they're cemented as part of, the Studio Underdog lineup. And the easy thing, and what a hell of a lot of brands would have done, is just every month they'd have been, we could quite easily do a new flavor. The possibilities are endless. But that's, where would that leave the brand? That just then it kind of becomes too much of a novelty and too much of a gimmick. And that's why for me, the 02 series was so important, because it helped to explain what it meant to be a Studio Underdog watch. I think a lot of people would have just assumed that the future of the brand was, pink and green on a dial. And where would, where would that lead to when, in a couple of years? I think, people it would have been saturated and the story would have been told. But, with the 02 series, what that kind of demonstrates is, is what it means, my approach to design and how that's linked to, to the watches that kind of fall under my brand. So yeah, it's definitely, that's been a consideration from the outset. And I've only started, now to revisit that 01 series, after the launch of the 02. I put a lot of projects on ice. The 02 took a whole 12 months longer than I thought it would. That was scheduled to launch in October 2022 and didn't launch till November 23. So, all that time I was saying, look, I'm not putting out any more 01 series, any more chronographs, because it's so important for me to kind of tell the development story of the brand. Now I feel like I can go and revisit it, and that's what I've done with some of these, some of these kind of projects.
TJ, you had a question?
Yeah, it's for the whole panel, because for me, Mike, I think everyone agrees, like, we get these very personal interactions with micro brands. And I have had one interaction kind of, at a personal level with one IWC rep once. It was really cool, very responsive and everything. But, I'm wondering really if my assumption, I understand that the big brands are not engaging at the grassroots level this much, but are they even, I guess my question is, are they even aware or concerned at all with the enthusiasts? Because we are a larger percentage of what the sales of a smaller brand, but when you get to Rolex, Omega, Breitling, are they even, are we more of an annoyance to them? Is it even a negative relationship where we're creating all this negative criticism about their new release, and are they happy to see that? What kind of weight do we carry with the larger brands, if at all, and is it always positive? That's my question.
That's a great question. I mean, it's difficult for me to say. I can speak to it from the way I approach it. For me, I think my brand is in its infancy. So I kind of, the focus for me is making sure that the people that have my watches love them. So I'll often go over and beyond to ensure, great customer service, even if that means sometimes kind of, bowing to customers that are probably, asking too much of me, and where other brands, might not. But for me, the way I kind of approach it is the enthusiast community is a community that kind of I feel like I can understand, because I'm sort of part of it. And the way I kind of focus on it is that's my core, and that's the nucleus of the brand, and everything else, that ripples out from there. I would love to know, and I'm sure maybe there's a way for me to find out, what percentage of Studio Underdog owners are enthusiasts. I'd imagine there's a lot more that wouldn't say they're kind of, cool watch enthusiasts than maybe I'd expect. So I don't know, but yeah, I mean, for me, that kind of approach and putting enthusiasts right at the center has obviously led to, has been integral to the success of the brand. But I just can't speak on why larger brands might have a separate approach, really.
Yeah.
Do you want me to take a shot at that?
Yeah, go for it, Mark. Yeah,
Give it
in
a
fact,
go.
somebody actually, Mark, before you do that, somebody asked.
That was a question I saw asked. Yeah.
Yeah, well, no, they actually asked about. Somebody said that they've seen everybody on other channels. I think was the question, except for Mark. So you are the Casual Watch Talks limited edition. You are our exclusive model. You can only be seen on this channel.
You can find me writing on Scottish watches, but I don't want to learn how to do video. I really don't. I hear and see the pain that Sam and everybody else goes through, and it's a skill set I don't want to develop. Quite frankly, my other half doesn't want more miscellaneous equipment in the house. She gets sick and tired of the photography stuff. So I don't like doing watch photography either. I do it, but I don't like it. I want motorcycles coming at me at 130 miles an hour. That's my sort of photography. But yeah, you can see me on Scottish Watches occasionally as a writer, and then this is my Instagram, which is almost entirely watches.
Cool. You were going to have a stab at the
the question of the enthusiasts and how we're viewed by the big brands.
There's a meme for that says a lion doesn't concern itself with the opinion of sheep. That's where I think big brands lie.
Well, I think you have to consider that, and you can define what a big brand is, but a big brand that's selling globally has to listen to a global audience. Whilst the watch community has grown, it's a tiny fraction of a global audience for a big brand. If a brand's in a position to do special editions or limited production watches, you may get feedback. Omega's would be a good example of that. But for the most part, a big brand has to listen to its global audience. They will probably do customer research, but or they'll follow what's selling as trends. They have that data. But I think it's relatively rare these days for a big brand to start paying a lot of attention to the community.
I think one thing that's interesting though is the community, extends beyond, the watch enthusiast community, also extends to kind of to editorial to some extent, and whether that's YouTube reviewers or editorial. So to be kind of ticking boxes of and making sure the enthusiast community is happy, I think is really important for then the wider general audience. Because the wider general audience, the first thing they'll likely do, and I do this in other areas that I'm less familiar with, if I'm looking to buy a microphone that I'm talking into now, the first thing that I'll do is look at what media are saying. I'll look at some YouTube reviews. Exactly. And I think that's what that's important for watches as well. So I mean that's I think why I've certainly that I put so much importance on it. Because I want those enthusiasts to to wear my watches, but it's important that people like the brands, which can then kind of ripple out.
And the big brands.
Sorry, Mark. Can I just thank? Just Bobby. Thank you so much for the very generous super chat. Very much appreciated.
And the big brands. Yeah, the big brands have other levers to pull, like trips to Zermatt.
Yeah,
they can afford to fly, but then the other problem the big brands have is the time to respond. Their model cycle is probably 2 to 3 years, maybe 2 years, depending on what you're doing. Whereas I suspect your model cycle can be faster because you don't have all the committees for a start.
I can be agile. I was able to get this watch delivered and have content and have a story out there, within a matter of days. And I could tell that story my way, and I had to think about how I wanted to do it, and boom, it was out there. Whereas, no big brands can really be quite so reactive.
We've had the
pause
same
everything and do the
question
pumpkin watch. You can pause everything and do that pumpkin watch, which was such a great story.
Yeah, exactly. That was just these natural ones that kind of develop always make for the best stories.
We've had the same question a couple of times, a couple of different ways. So I'll ask you this one. It's what watch were you wearing when you first designed your first watch? And a couple of people have asked, like, what is your daily driver? or what is your like favorite watch that perhaps isn't one of the ones that you've created yourself?
So what watch was I wearing? It would have probably been one of two at the time. I had a Black Bay 58, so potentially that. I also had a Christopher Ward Moon Glow, so probably rotating between those two before I'd started my own brand. And then in terms of brands that I like and I've got watches from, it massively varies. But something that I've been leaning a bit more into in recent times is tends to be the brands that I kind of rub shoulders with a bit more now. In terms of when I go to a fair, I do the wind up watch fairs in the US, so Chicago, San Francisco, New York, and I've justified, or it feels like a pretty good excuse for me to support some of those, one of those other brands that is at the fair. So I'll typically have a wander around and pick up a watch from there. So I've recently picked up a Brew watch. I picked up a Serica. End of last year, I grabbed a Fears, one of the mallard green ones, which is lovely. Sort of building out a little green British collection because I got the green Bel Canto as well. So that's kind of where my focus has been more recently. Beyond that, I've got sort of a vintage Gerard Perregaux that I bought on eBay in a non-working condition and got back to ticking, and got a nice custom strap from the strap tailor for that one. What else? I've got a Rolex palm dial, the green palm dial. I've got a Mr. Jones watch. So yeah, it massively varied. It's quite a lot. I guess a lot of British brands in there, of course. But yeah.
Awesome. Cool.
Yeah, I was going to say a company should care about the consumer design-wise and quality-wise, material-wise too, but companies need to carve out an identity for themselves, usually down to design. And I mean, you can say Moser and Grand Seiko with their dials, RM and Hublot with their case materials, Urwerk and MB&F with their case design, Lang and Patek with their movements. And I just thought that was, when we talk, should a watch company care about you? I think you decide which watch company you want to go to. A collector, collectors like to buy into various aspects, whether it be the heritage that we talked about earlier on, or hype, or man hours that have been spent on the products and design. And a watch can't fit all of those categories. Collectors of high-end watches and will follow those categories, but low-end brands can appeal with just aesthetics and build quality, I feel.
Yeah, I think it's basically brands have different ways of telling us a story, and whether that story is kind of innovation in design, or kind of workmanship of materials, or or uses of different materials, or the story that's kind of beyond the product, the legacy, the history. And one of the kind of the focuses that we have, the storytelling elements that we focus on is kind of an approach of honesty, approach of kind of being a little bit more relatable. The way we kind of communicate is quite open, honest, and fun. But yeah, I guess that's it. It's just different stories to be told, and the different brands tell their own stories.
Sure. Yeah.
Awesome. Let me just see if we've got any other questions. There's a couple of different people have asked a similar question, but around the theme of, are you getting a lot of companies now wanting to collaborate with you, or are you getting some of the larger companies, or maybe the jewelers, like Nicholas at Fears has collaboration with jewelers, doesn't he? So have you had that kind of as well now?
Collaborations is something that I really want to kind of delve a bit more into, especially this year, I'd say. I kind of take a lot of influence from the sneaker market, I'm a bit of a sneakerhead myself, and there's a lot to be learned from that market. We're talking about the kind of, the drops and how people do the queuing system and whatnot. I'm sure if they'd had Nike involved anywhere along the process, they'd have said no, because Nike, as an example, they haven't done physical drops in store for for years now, maybe close on a decade probably, because they saw the flaws in that system and moved to an online drop system, and to make it fairer. I've deviated there, but basically I take a lot of a lot of cues, and there's a lot of interest to be found from different industries. And one thing that's always fascinating is when a collaboration is done really well and it tells a story that that whether it's a collaboration with a retailer or a collaboration with a brand, tells a story that can't be told by just one of those entities. For me, in terms of working with retailers, it makes slightly less sense on the surface of it, because I don't really work with retailers. My focus is on the kind of the direct consumer, is to the community. So that makes less sense. But in terms of collaborations, that's something that I'm looking to do a little bit more of this year. I've kind of been quite slow on that, because it's something that you got to find the right partners and you've got to tell the right story. It's so easy for brands to, I don't know, put another logo on the dial, or just pick another color and churn it out and split the profits. Blah blah blah. That's not interesting. That I want something that you can really kind of sink your teeth into, and that you want to tell your friends about, and that you go to a meetup and you want to wear that watch and you want to tell its story. And those kinds of things take just a little bit more time. So no, I've certainly turned away a fair few partnership opportunities, just because I'll say what's the idea, what's the concept, and there isn't one. And it's just a case of I've seen Studio Underdog is on the rise. I want in. That's not a story, Where's the romance? So yeah, but this year I'm pleased to say there's a few really, really cool stories to be told.
Yeah, and none so cool as the blueberry one that you did from last year. That was a pretty cool one-off.
Yeah, exactly, and that was something that came, really naturally. A lot of the kind of the weird, unique projects that I've done have just been about a really interesting story to tell, and have just come really naturally. So the blueberry was a limited edition that we did with the Scottish Watches auction, which raised, I think the auction raised between £50,000 and £60,000 for charity, and Studio Underdog did well to kind of contribute to that. So yeah,
I'd love to see Studio Underdog in a different case material, maybe I don't know, sort of carbon or something advanced like that. That'd obviously come with a collaboration with a different company, I presume.
Exactly. Yeah. That's what I think collaborations with different brands, for example, can allow products like that. Could Studio Underdog ever, could we ever make a gold case, in our own right? I think it would be really tough. It would be really confusing. Whereas, if we sort of collaborated with, a brands that were known for their use of materials and known for for gold cases, it opens up it opens up possibilities beyond with just what Studio Underdog could do standalone. So that's one of the angles. That's one of the things that's exciting. What could if we're talking about other brand collaborations, what can they bring to the table that Studio Underdog couldn't do on its own? And that can make for a really exciting product.
Yeah,
that's a great
maybe
point.
Not bioceramic.
So, yeah, exactly. not quite bioceramic. It's not quite the direction, but yeah.
Awesome. Well, we've gone a little bit over time, but that was so good. Richard, thank you so much for joining us, and thanks to everyone being so active in the comments section as well.
Yeah. And anybody,
Guys,
anybody in the UK will see Richard at British Watchmakers Day on the 9th of March.
Yeah,
I think
I'll
there's
be
a couple
there.
of Red Bar. I think you've got a couple of Red Bar UK appearances as well. So.
Yeah, I'm off to Leeds later this week. So that'll be a bit of fun. But yeah, it's been great to chat with you guys. So thanks very much for having me, and I hope to see most of you at in March.
Cool. Well,
All
thanks
right.
everyone for watching, and we'll see you next time on Casual Watch Talk. Alan stream.